Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Week 14 edition of my top waiver wire targets and streamable defenses. Hopefully, you guys don't need to pick up somebody to win your playoff spot. Hopefully, you got it already locked up. But just in case you got some leagues like me where you need a win this week to get into the playoffs, hopefully, I got some names on here and some defenses on here that can help you get a big win in Week 14. As always, starting with the top waiver wire targets. Again, in case I have any first-time listeners, these players have to have at least 50% roster availability. This is per Yahoo, so there's a good chance that they're out there on the market. Starting with the quarterback position, at this point of the season, just like I said last week with the quarterback and running back spot, more than likely you're not going to find a quarterback or a running back that's going to go win you the championship at this point. If you maybe like me, where I have leagues where I have Trevor and Kyler's on a bye, and now Trevor, we'll see, is probably not going to play in this game. So you're trying to find a streaming quarterback. One guy that you can maybe turn to, Gardner Minshew, the Colts quarterback. He's available in 77% of the leagues. Obviously, he is a roller coaster of a ride of a quarterback. You never know what you're going to get out of him, but the fact is he does have a good, nice high ceiling to him. He's thrown the ball this past weekend. He threw the 312 yards and 2 touchdowns. I want to say that was his. I know he's gotten at least one before. I want to say he's got 3 or 4 300-yard games with the Colts this season. And the reason why I got him up there is not only he's coming off a strong game as far as production wise. He does draw a good matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Bengals are giving up 17.8 points per game. That is the 8th most allowed in the NFL. So if you're dealing with a bye or you're dealing with injuries, I mean, there's so many quarterbacks that are injured at this point. It feels like whoever does win a fantasy championship or maybe even the Super Bowl, it's going to come down to who has a healthy quarterback when it matters, right? All right, so moving into my running back out of the week, this is just going to feed into what I told you guys about last week. Ezekiel Elliott, he's available in 60% of the leagues, and it's because Ramondre Stevenson got hurt. I believe he got a high sprained ankle. I know I saw the report said it is expected that Stevenson's going to miss multiple weeks, and then with them being out of the playoff picture, does he even rush to come back? So it does look like Ezekiel Elliott's going to be the Patriots running back going forward. Doesn't necessarily excite me, but at this point of the season, if you need help at the running back depth, and especially if you had Ramondre Stevenson, and if Zeke's still out there, I'd go grab him. Now, when he took over for Stevenson in this past weekend, he did run the ball 17 times for 52 yards. He also had 4 receptions for 40 yards on 5 targets. So he touched the ball 21 times. He almost had the ball in his hands 22 times, which you love out of a running back. And Zeke actually does draw a good solid matchup on this Thursday night game, going against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are allowing 18.2 points per game. That is the 11th most in the NFL. So knowing that Stevenson is not going to be playing, and Zeke's going to get the bulk of the carries and probably the most touches across that Patriots offense, I think he's a sneaky flex play in Week 14. My wide receiver ad of the week, guys, I think I've told you to add Elijah Moore multiple times at this point. But yeah, Elijah Moore, he should be added for at least. I understand why people are not necessarily picking him up, because you can't really trust that quarterback situation in Cleveland. And you never know who's going to get be at quarterback, because they've dealt with so many injuries at that spot this year. But the fact is, he is getting the ball thrown to him no matter who is at quarterback. This past weekend, he had 4 receptions for 83 yards on 12 targets. Now, you'd like to see Joe Flacco connect more with him, and you can only imagine what his production would have been this past weekend if he caught more balls out on those 12 targets. But then, like I said, he's been getting targeted so much this season. Over the past 4 games, he's received at least 7 targets. And then out of the 12 games the Browns have played, Elijah Moore has been targeted 7 times in 9 of those games. So, and then you have to factor in too this week, Amari Cooper left that game with a concussion. Not a lot of players have played the following week with after getting a concussion this season, and he does draw a great matchup against the Jaguars defense, who's given up 24.8 points per game this season. That is the 6th most allowed in the league. So I definitely like, if Cooper does end up getting ruled out, I like Elijah Moore as a play this week as you're in your wide receiver spots. I think he's a low end wide receiver too, because you can't really without Cooper there, you can't really trust the quarterback situation, but he can give you like a a high ceiling, close to like a wide receiver one performance, if he can start getting the quarterback to connect with him on those targets that he's getting. My tight end out of the week, this is kind of just like the running back, the quarterback spot, right? You're not really going to find a tight end that's going to help you go win championships at this point. At this point, you're kind of looking for the right matchup and maybe who has least seeing targets like Elijah Moore is. Well, kind of like Elijah Moore, you can't really trust him, but the fact is he's getting a nice set of targets every week. It's going to be Tyler Conklin. He's available at 80% in the leagues. This past weekend, he 3 receptions for 35 yards, not that much, but the fact is he got targeted 9 times. So you got to think of whether it's Zach Wilson or Trevor Siemian or maybe the Brett Ripien that they added off the waivers or off that practice squad, maybe that can put him get him more completions on the targets he's seeing. Because speaking of the targets, he's gotten at least 5 targets in 4 of his last 4 games, and he does draw a very solid matchup this week going against the Texans defense. They are giving up 7.9 points per game to tight ends. That is tied for the 6th most allowed. So if you're looking for a streaming tight end, Conklin's one that you should have in mind. My flex out of the week, this is strictly as like I was talking about Zeke, he was in there. Guys, your running backs, if you have a running back right now that's in your starting lineup, you're not going to put him on your bench. You don't have to debate him. He's a plug and play running back. You should have his backup, especially if you know the backup's a good backup on your bench, because if something happens to him, you can just replace him right away with that premium handcuff. And to me, Tyjae Spears is a premium handcuff. I've talked him up as an ad earlier this season. He's this past weekend. Derrick Henry did leave with a concussion. It was late in the 4th quarter. So Spears was actually already getting worked in the offense with Henry in there, and then he took over the workload once Henry was out. Now Henry has been cleared from concussion, so he is expected to play next Monday. But that's just just another example. What if Henry, had to miss this game with a concussion, or if he gets hurt in this next game with whatever type of injury, all of a sudden you can have Tyjae Spears ready to go if you're a Henry manager. Now this past weekend, Tyjae Spears did run the ball 16 times for 75 yards. He also had 4 receptions for 13 yards on 6 total targets. Doesn't necessarily have the best matchup, but again, it sounds like Henry's going to be good to go. Dolphins only give out 14.4 points per game to running backs this year. That is the 9th fewest allowed in the NFL. But yeah, if you're a Derrick Henry manager, go grab Spears. And honestly, in my opinion, he's such a good premium handcuff where if you don't have good quality running back depth, and maybe you have a starting running back where it's kind of muddied as a backup, there's no clear-cut guy to add on your bench as a handcuff in case your starter gets hurt, go grab Spears. So that way you at least keep that from your opponent who has Henry in the playoffs. And then if something does happen, you might be able to get Spears in your lineup going forward. So yeah, that is my top waiver wire ads of this week. Moving into my streamable defenses, just like those players, guys, these defense have to have at least 50% roster availability for you. So there is a good chance you can pluck them off the waivers and stream them in your lineups this week. My number 1 streaming defense, I'm going to go with those feisty Texans out of Houston. The Texans defense is available in 86% of the leagues, and they're going against a Jets offense that is completely struggling. We don't know who's going to be the quarterback at this point. We don't know if it's going to be it's either probably going to be Zach Wilson or Trevor Siemian. But when we look at the data points, as far as Houston's defense, they're actually right now tied for the 5th most takeaways this season. And then everything about the Jets offense screams the stream of defense against them. They are tied for the 2nd most giveaways. So you got a team that's given the ball away going against a team that's been very good at taking the ball away. And then the Jets have actually given up the 3rd most sacks this season, and they're only scoring 14.3 points per game, and that is the 3rd fewest in the NFL. So you got an offense that can't score, which should give you a high floor as a streaming defense. You got an offense that's giving up a lot of sacks, so that can start racking up the points. And then you got that offense that's giving the ball away going against a defense that's taking the ball away. So I could see a big ceiling performance out of the Texans defense in week 14. Another one I really like, the Saints against the Panthers. The Saints are available in 57% of the leagues right now. The Saints, as much as their offense is struggling, their defense is still pretty solid down there. They are actually tied for the 3rd most takeaways, so that's something to factor in. And then when you look at the Panthers offense, they have given up the 4th most sacks this season, and then they're only scoring 15.9 points per game this year. And we've seen the complete disaster that the Panthers have been. So obviously See, when you got a struggling franchise as a whole, a struggling offense, a struggling rookie quarterback, they don't put up a lot of points. I just view this as a high floor defense to play, but it does give you a little bit of a ceiling because Carolina is giving up the sacks and the Saints are taking the ball away this season. Moving into my number 3 streaming defense, I am going to go with the Packers against the Giants. The Packers are available in 80% of the leagues right now, and this is strictly because the Giants are giving up so many sacks this season. They are giving up the most sacks by far across the NFL. And then you got a Packers defense that got Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, the kid out of Iowa that's a first round pick. I think it's Lucas Van Ness. I kind of dropped his name out of nowhere. Anyways, getting back on track. So they got guys that can get after Tommy DeVito and get those sacks and potentially get those turnovers. And then you got to factor in that the Giants are only averaging 13.3 points per game this season. So that should give the Packers a high floor as a streaming defense. And I just like the chance that they're going to produce a lot of sacks to add on to that high floor. My number 4 streaming defense, after how Jake Browning looked last night in the Bengals offense, I had to drop him. I thought I was going to end up ranking the Colts defense as a higher streaming defense, but Jake Browning, at least in that game, he looked like he can potentially put up points. But I am going to go ahead and factor in that the Colts defense has been pretty solid this year. They give up a lot of yards, but they have they're really good at taking the ball away and getting sacks. So speaking of that, the Colts defense, they're actually tied for the 3rd most takeaways this season. I think it's they have 17 games in a row with at least 1 takeaway. And I think that's the longest active streak in the NFL, if my memory serves me right. And then they actually have the 2nd most sacks in the NFL. And they're getting Grover Stewart back in the lineup, who should help them defend the run. And we'll just have to see. Was this Jake Browning performance a flash in a pan, and he kind of reverts back to the means, and he's going to end up turning the ball over, and the Bengals offense is going to struggle? That's something I would be willing to take a gamble on if I wanted to stream the Colts defense this week. My number 5 streaming defense, it's a Thursday night game, so if you decide to do this one, you'll go ahead and want to pick them up in the next couple of days. But yeah, the Patriots defense against the Steelers. The Patriots are available in 77% of leagues, and this is mainly because it's a struggling offense with Mitch Trubisky. So I like the idea that Bill Belichick's going to find a way to get some turnovers off of Mitch Trubisky. The Steelers offense is only scoring 16 points a game. That is the 5th fewest in the NFL. Now, I know the Patriots are let's just say they're terrible on offense, and that's why everybody views them as a terrible team. But their defense is still playing pretty well. A crazy stat that came out this past weekend: the Patriots have allowed their last 3 opponents to 10 points or less, and they're the first team since like 1938 to lose 3 games in a row when they've held their opponents to 10 points or less. So they've actually been keeping opponents scoring low. They're going against a team that's been struggling to score points, and then that offense now has Mitch Trubisky at the quarterback position. So I kind of feel this is a very high floor defense where you're betting on that the Patriots are going to find a way to take the ball away from Trubisky at some point, maybe get you a pick 6 if you wanted to stream them. So yeah, those are my top streaming defenses of week 14. As always, any players on the waivers or defenses on the waivers you're considering, get in the comments or the DMs or shoot me a text. I always try to get back to people as soon as I can. And then as always, hit the like button, subscribe, follow, whatever platform you're on. Make sure you guys are connected with me so you can always get that content as soon as it's posted. Other than that, you guys will get me back tomorrow night when I do my top starts and sits for week 14. I'll talk to you then. Peace out. Talk to you later.